My name's Ian Clifton. I'm a third generation farmer at Coonabarabran, northwest New South Wales. We've been on our farm for 97 years and currently we're experiencing a severe drought.
I'm Gavin Moore. This is our farm at Glenmore, about 70k southwest of Sydney. I'm a 7th generation dairy farmer. Property's been in our family for almost 200 years.
I'm Charlie Prell. I'm a sheep farmer from near Crookwell in New South Wales. I've been here for all of my life, for 60 years, except for when I went to school. My family have had this farm for 100 years, so I'm the 4th generation to be here.
The big droughts are 1902 and 1946, 2002, and this one is currently tracking to be in the top 3 worst droughts in the last 100 years. We have lost about $250,000 in sales that we've been forced to sell our livestock at lighter weights and less cents per kilo, and it's currently costing us between $8,000 and $9,000 a week, or sort of $1,200 to $1,300 a day, which we would not normally be spending any at all feeding our cattle in a normal season.
Yeah, she does need, she's sick, alright.
Droughts are normal. You've got to embrace droughts. You've got to love droughts. Otherwise you shouldn't go farming. But the emotional toll is when you see your socks suffering, you're doing everything you can to save them and feed them and look after them, and they still die. But death is a very common part of being a farmer of cattle or sheep. So, but when they start dying in numbers like we're losing them at the moment, it can be difficult.
The current drought that's been ongoing for the last 18 months, 2 years, has really had a dire impact on our family, with added pressures for finances, trying to find feed, high prices of feed, low water on the property, which in our situation is basically a loss of milk production out of the dairy. The ultimate emotion is when you start culling animals for a number of reasons, but to reduce your stocking rate is always hard. Certainly it adds a lot more pressure once you leave the dairy, coming back to the family. Family time is always stressed, and certainly financial pressures are dictating the rise in the mental health issue. We're seeing a rise of rural suicide rates, a rise in the mental health issue, with cases on the increase of families that are seeking help and support.
You generally have to reduce your animal numbers during a drought, and we have done that here, where our numbers have reduced by probably 50% or more. So all of that impacts on your bottom line. You know, the flow-on effects of that go right through the economy of the local town that I live in. It's pervasive, and it's not like it's just for a couple of months. Well, the current drought, that'll play out into the future, but I know that my two children are very reluctant to come back to the land from their experiences during the 90s, when there was a real commodity price crisis, but also the millennium drought of the first 10 years of this century. There's a lot of people that are losing their jobs because of the drought. A lot of those people have got no choice. There's no work. The work's dried up because there's no crop, or there's no grass, or there's no economy. So they have to move to find work.
The onset of this drought in our area in particular has been very rapid. We had floods in March in 2017. We also saw temperatures in mid-June, early July hitting 30 degrees still. Our average rainfall in the area is somewhere around about 600 to 650 mils a year. The last 18 months, we've seen less than about 120 mils fall. Over summer last year, 2017-2018, we had 12 days over 50 degrees of temperature, and that's just unheard of in our area. We've got 16 dams on the property and 2 creeks that run on either side of the property. 8 of those dams are completely dry now, and both creeks have stopped running. We're seeing cracks in the ground that are up to 3 to 4 inches wide, and some down as deep as 50 to 60 centimetres deep. To produce milk, our cows drink on average somewhere between 120 and 160 litres of water a day. So water is a significant resource on our farm and in our industry. The 8 dams that we have roughly about 3 to 4 months worth of water left in them going forward. So is that going to be enough to get us through the hot summer months when we're already experiencing temperatures that are getting up to 30 degrees, and we're only just in the first month, or just out of the first month of spring? But we're not seeing water restrictions put in place for our urban counterparts. And that's also a worrying sign as well. It's going to be a challenge to see what happens in the future when the drought does break. And that's another area that the governments should be looking to support farmers, not just helping them get through the drought, but starting to plan and work through what the processes are when the drought does break, because costs are still going to be high at the farm gate, even when we do get substantial rain to break the drought.
Droughts are sent to us to move people on. It's like the refresh button on your computer. I think a lot of people will reassess their future once the drought breaks. Whether this is time to have a change or give it to the next generation to have a go. Climate change is certainly something that is normal and happens all the time. The question of whether it's man-induced climate change, which I think it probably does affect it. We seem to be getting more droughts and more severe droughts. Whether they believe in climate change or not, experts are telling us that this is game on, and you've got to start to prepare your business. So if all their predictions do come true, that you're in a place to be able to survive the future.
still a percentage of farmers who unfortunately just have this unbelievable optimism that it's going to rain again tomorrow. It may not rain tomorrow or the next day or even the rest of this year. And the rains, it's a wonderful boon and never knock it back, but it's not going to make the difference between being in a drought or not for most people. Farmers who get into a situation where they've made decisions virtually in arrears without having some sort of planning for the future are the ones that get burnt the worst in the drought. I left school and came home to the farm in the 1980s into a really bad drought, and I've got photos of that drought, and this farm was a desert then. I pledged to myself then that I would never let that happen to this land again. There's opportunities in addressing climate change for farmers through capturing carbon and putting it into the soil, but also through hosting renewable energy infrastructure. Since I've had these turbines and been getting paid to have these turbines, the improvement in my mental health and my wife's mental health has just been unbelievable. Without the prospect of these turbines being here, we wouldn't be here.
Any government policies tends to affect farmers the most. So for example, on our country we have about 1,000 hectares of native forest, and that's all been locked up and we're not allowed to use that anymore, but we still have to pay shire rates and local government rates. And when they bring in legislation like that to save the environment and for Australia to meet its obligation in international treaties, and the rest of the community doesn't have to contribute anything to climate change, farmers naturally try and resist, and one of their arguments is, well, climate change is not going to happen. But it's really from a fear of being more boxed in by government legislation.
Most farmers are in regional Australia, and regional Australia is going to get hit hard by rises in temperature, but not just hotter summers. I'm talking about hotter summers, bigger and more intensive floods, droughts as we've seen currently, but also huge anomalies in the weather like massive frost events. There's this latent group of farmers out there who have been nervous up until now to mention climate change, to talk about it, talk about the threat of it, and then discuss possible solutions. They haven't had the support, I suppose, to raise a difficult topic in the pub in the local town or the footy or whatever it is. That's changed really quickly, and it's really good that it is, because for me, climate change it's an existential threat, which means it's a threat to the human race. Farmers are at the front line of climate change. We're feeling the effects of it already. I think we're past the point of waiting for politicians to act. Politicians don't tend to act on large-scale social issues, and climate change is definitely one of those. The politicians tend to catch that wave once a social movement starts.
We really need for people in the city to get in their car, go for a 45-minute drive to an hour drive out into these close by rural neighbourhoods and just see what is happening.
There's no country in Australia for old men when you go farming in Australia. It's one of my good sayings. There'll always be a way, there's always an answer somewhere.